Good evening, Patriots Nation. I hope you're all doing well because the last 2 weeks of Patriots OTAs have quietly revealed something that every New England fan should be paying close attention to. Because while these practices are still voluntary and the mandatory minicamp has not even started yet, some players are already making powerful statements about what this team could become heading into the season. And if there is one player who completely changed the narrative after an up and down start, it is Drake Maye. Just 1 week ago, there were questions surrounding his consistency after a practice where he looked a little off rhythm. But what happened during the latest OTA sessions completely flipped that conversation. Instead of struggling, Maye looked like the quarterback everyone hoped he would become. He was confident, decisive, and incredibly accurate, delivering one of the most impressive performances of the offseason so far. The numbers alone tell an exciting story. Drake Maye completed 17 of his 23 passing attempts, but what really stood out was a remarkable stretch where he completed 14 consecutive passes without the football touching the ground. Throughout multiple practice periods, he consistently connected on intermediate and deep throws, showing precision and confidence that immediately caught the attention of everyone watching. That kind of performance matters because this is exactly what Patriots fans have been waiting to see. The development of the young franchise quarterback remains the biggest storyline surrounding this team, and after this latest practice, there is every reason to believe his progression is moving in the right direction. His bounce-back performance demonstrated resilience and the ability to respond after criticism, a quality that great quarterbacks always seem to possess. But while the quarterback generated plenty of excitement, another storyline emerged that could have a significant impact on the offensive line. Veteran tackle Morgan Moses left practice early after suffering an apparent injury and eventually returned to the facility accompanied by a member of the training staff. Considering his experience and age, any physical setback naturally becomes something worth monitoring, especially with the mandatory minicamp approaching. Ironically, that unfortunate situation created an opportunity for another player to shine. Caleb Lomu immediately stepped into first-team reps at right tackle, gaining valuable experience against top competition. Those repetitions could prove extremely valuable in the long run because if injuries occur during the regular season, the Patriots will need young players who are already comfortable playing alongside the starters. The coaching staff appears to understand exactly how important those opportunities can be. Rather than simply giving backup reps, Lomu is receiving meaningful work with the first unit, allowing him to accelerate his development. Every snap taken against starting defenders provides experience that cannot be replicated elsewhere, and the organization may already be preparing him for a larger role than many expected entering the offseason. Not every storyline has been positive, however. One of the biggest concerns involves Kyle Williams, who has yet to participate in OTA practices despite generating excitement during rookie minicamp. For an undrafted player trying to earn a roster spot, every practice represents an opportunity to impress coaches and establish trust. Missing valuable developmental time creates an uphill battle that becomes increasingly difficult as training camp approaches. History has shown that players fighting for the final roster spots often separate themselves during these offseason practices. Strong performances can completely change careers, while absences make it harder to build momentum. If Williams hopes to compete for a position on the final roster, returning to the field during mandatory minicamp could become extremely important. Meanwhile, another receiver continues building momentum every single practice. Demario "Pop" Douglas has consistently demonstrated his ability to create separation and make defenders miss after the catch. His chemistry with Drake Maye continues to grow, and one particular deep completion showcased exactly why he remained such a dangerous weapon. After securing the catch along the sideline, Douglas made an outstanding move that left his defender completely beaten, producing one of the most impressive offensive plays of the OTA sessions. His production also creates an interesting competition inside the receiver room. While Douglas continues making plays with the first-team offense, Efton Chisholm III has also quietly produced an efficient offseason, catching every target thrown his way during practice. As the offseason progresses, this battle for playing time could become one of the most fascinating position competitions on the roster, with both players giving the coaching staff difficult decisions to make. With mandatory minicamp just around the corner and several players already beginning to separate themselves, the momentum surrounding this Patriots team is starting to build. Some veterans veterans are reaffirming their importance, young players are fighting for opportunities, and Drake Maye's outstanding performance has given fans another reason to believe that something special may be developing inside New England. But after everything we've seen through these first 2 weeks of OTAs, which storyline do you believe will have the biggest impact once mandatory minicamp begins? Drake Maye's incredible progression, the battle at wide receiver, or the growing concern surrounding injuries? One player who is quietly becoming impossible to ignore throughout these OTA sessions is Rhamondre Taylor III, and if his recent performances are any indication, the Patriots may have found another defensive weapon capable of making a major impact this season. While much of the attention has naturally been focused on the offense and the development of Drake Maye, Taylor has consistently been creating problems for opposing linemen every time he steps onto the practice field. Reports from the practices describe a defensive lineman who continues finding ways to disrupt plays, even in non-contact situations. After already generating multiple sacks during earlier sessions, Taylor followed that performance by recording 2 separate pass breakups at the line of scrimmage. Batting down passes may not generate the same headlines as sacks, but it demonstrates awareness, timing, and the ability to affect plays even when a defender cannot reach the quarterback. Those kinds of plays illustrate why the Patriots coaching staff appears to have tremendous confidence in the depth of this defensive front. Instead of relying on only a handful of stars, New England now possesses multiple interior defenders capable of rotating throughout games while maintaining a high level of production. That rotation could become one of the team's greatest strengths once the regular season begins. When you look at the overall defensive line, the amount of talent becomes even more impressive. Christian Barmore and Milton Williams provide proven starters, while Joshua Farmer, Corey Judon, and Rhamondre Taylor III create exceptional depth behind them. Having multiple players capable of contributing meaningful snaps gives the Patriots flexibility that many teams simply do not possess. For opposing offenses, that creates a nightmare scenario. Even when the starters rotate out, fresh defenders with legitimate talent continue entering the game, keeping the pressure constant throughout 4 quarters. In today's NFL, where defensive line rotations are essential for maintaining energy and effectiveness, this kind of depth could become a major competitive advantage. As encouraging as those defensive developments have been, perhaps no arrival generated more excitement than seeing AJ Brown immediately take the practice field following his acquisition. His presence alone changes the atmosphere surrounding the offense, but what stood out even more was his immediate commitment to integrating himself with his new teammates. Rather than taking extra time to settle in, Brown reportedly arrived early, participated throughout the practice session, and immediately began building chemistry within the offense. During the full team drills, he received multiple opportunities alongside Drake Maye, giving fans an early glimpse of what this new quarterback-receiver combination might look like once meaningful games begin. One particular route perfectly demonstrated the level of talent Brown brings to New England. Running a comeback route during team drills, he quickly created separation before securing the completion from Maye. The play highlighted the polished route running and explosiveness that have made him one of the league's premier wide receivers over the past several seasons. For a young quarterback like Drake Maye, having a target capable of consistently creating separation can completely transform an offense. Instead of needing perfect throws into tight windows, quarterbacks gain confidence knowing elite receivers can win one-on-one matchups and make difficult catches. That relationship often accelerates quarterback development, making Brown's arrival potentially one of the biggest offseason additions for the Patriots offense. What makes this entire offseason especially intriguing is that these practices remain voluntary. The full roster has not yet been assembled under mandatory conditions, meaning there is still another level this team can potentially reach once every player reports and the competition intensifies. That next stage arrives with mandatory minicamp beginning on June 9th, a date that could provide even clearer answers about position battles, chemistry, and depth chart movement. With veterans and rookies finally working together under mandatory participation, coaches will have a much better opportunity to evaluate exactly where this roster stands heading into training camp. Momentum is clearly building inside the organization. Drake Maye appears to be finding his rhythm. Pop Douglas continues making explosive plays. Caleb Lomu is gaining invaluable experience. Rhamondre Taylor III keeps proving his disruptive ability, and AJ Brown has already begun establishing himself within the offense. These are the kinds of developments that create optimism long before the regular season actually starts. Of course, questions still remain. Injuries must be monitored carefully, roster battles will become increasingly intense, and several young players still need to prove they belong. But after 2 weeks of OTAs, the overall picture suggests a team that is developing chemistry, while several key contributors are taking important steps forward. As mandatory minicamp approaches, Patriots fans have every reason to pay close attention because the next practices could significantly shape expectations for the upcoming season. The foundation appears to be forming, individual performances are beginning to separate players from the competition, and the excitement surrounding this roster continues growing with every practice. There is also another important detail that should not be overlooked as these offseason practices continue. Every successful team entering a new season needs internal competition, and based on everything that has happened during these OTA sessions, that competition appears stronger than it has been in quite some time. At multiple positions, players are pushing each other every single day. The battle at slot receiver remains one of the clearest examples. Pop Douglas has continued to demonstrate why he deserves significant snaps with the starting offense, consistently getting open and producing explosive plays. At the same time, Efton Chisholm III has quietly taken advantage of every opportunity presented to him, showing reliable hands and making the most of his targets. Competition like that benefits everyone involved. Veterans cannot become comfortable. Young players know opportunities exist if they perform well, and coaches are able to evaluate multiple options before making difficult roster decisions. By the time training camp arrives, every repetition from these OTA sessions could end up influencing who earns valuable playing time once the regular season begins. The offensive line situation deserves similar attention. Morgan Moses' early exit from practice naturally created concern, but it also accelerated Caleb Lomu's development by placing him against the first team defense. Those unexpected opportunities often become defining moments for young players trying to establish themselves. If Lomu continues responding positively whenever his number is called, the Patriots could enter the season with greater confidence in their tackle depth than originally anticipated. Developing young offensive linemen has always required patience, but meaningful practice reps alongside the starters provide invaluable experience that simply cannot be replicated in meetings or walkthroughs. Another encouraging sign from these first 2 weeks has been the overall chemistry beginning to form between Drake Maye and his receiving core. Building timing and trust takes countless repetitions, and every completed pass during these offseason practices helps establish that connection before the games start counting. The addition of A.J. Brown only raises the ceiling of the offense even further. Defenses will now have to account for an elite receiver capable of winning individual matchups, creating opportunities for everyone else on the field. That could allow players